All right, good afternoon. We're going to have a little personal briefing from my friend Iftikhar here. But hopefully some of you are on the watching on the interweb. Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, just briefed the Security Council via video conferencing system from Munich in Germany, where she is accompanying the Secretary General who is attending the Munich Security Conference. She warned the current situation in the region is extremely dangerous, noting with concern the reports of fresh ceasefire violations across the contact line over the past several hours. If verified, she said they must not be allowed to escalate further. Ms. DiCarlo said the Secretary General has remained fully engaged with key actors and has reiterated the same ambiguous message: there is no alternative to diplomacy. Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity with its internationally recognized borders must be respected in accordance with relevant General Assembly resolutions. Ms. DiCarlo also told the members of the Security Council that the world is looking to collective security mechanisms in Europe, but also to the Security Council to help ensure the only skirmishes will be diplomatic skirmishes. Her full remarks have been shared with you. Our Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is concluding her visit to Haiti today. This morning, she took part in the technical conference on cholera elimination. Ms. Mohammed noted that the efforts of the Haitian people over the last 11.5 years have brought Haiti to the brink of a historical moment. As we look to eliminate cholera in Haiti, she said, the country will be the first in modern times to do so following a large-scale outbreak. The Deputy Secretary General said that Haiti's efforts have made an example to the world, and the country has led the way and confirmed that national expertise and leadership can implement the changes that are needed. She stressed that we must remain focused and determined as we look ahead, and that the final mile is never an easy one. Also this morning, Amina Mohammed had a meeting with religious leaders and took part in a town hall with the UN staff in Haiti. Yesterday, in her closing remarks at the international event for the financing and of the reconstruction of the southern peninsula of Haiti, Ms. Mohammed welcomed the fact that close to $600 million was pledged, surpassing the immediate targets for the conference. The Deputy Secretary General emphasized that the reconstruction of the southern peninsula needs to be framed as part of a greater commitment to put Haiti on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Later today, she's expected to speak with the media, and we'll share the full transcript of that event with you, and she will be arriving back in New York late this evening. The high-level pledging event for Yemen will take place on March 16th and will be virtually co-hosted by the United Nations and the governments of Sweden and Switzerland. This is the 5th year that both Sweden and Switzerland are co-hosting the event, and we're very appreciative for their continued commitment. This event will be a key opportunity for the international community to demonstrate its continued commitment to the people of Yemen. We call on donors to pledge generously at the high-level event and to commit and disburse funds even before the conference so we can avert a further reduction of vital assistance. As you will recall, I think Martin Griffiths yesterday or 2 days ago mentioned the risk of further cuts of humanitarian aid in Yemen if funds were not received. Also, I'd like to mention on a more positive development, we can confirm that the UN worker who had been detained in Marib since mid-November was released on Monday, on February 14th. An NGO worker who had been arrested in a separate incident in Marib has also been released. Regrettably, the 2 UN staff who were arrested in Sana'a last November remain in detention. We continue to call for full respect of UN's privileges and immunities and for their immediate release. Also, in a separate incident, as you will recall, last Friday, 5 other UN staffers were detained by armed men. They, unfortunately, remain in detention, and we continue to work for their release. I have a humanitarian update on a rather detailed one on the situation in Ethiopia. And it says that the humanitarian situation in northern region of Afar continues to deteriorate due to the ongoing conflict. Due to insecurity, we, along with our partners, have been unable to access many of the sites where those displaced by the fighting have taken shelter. We're providing aid in parts of afar we can access. For example, 80,000 children and pregnant and lactating women in 7 districts have been reached with help to address malnutrition. Mobile health and nutrition teams are also providing help in 14 districts. In the neighboring Tigray region, medical supplies were airlifted to Mekelle in the past week. On February 11th, the World Health Organization has airlifted 10 metric tons of medical supplies, including medical equipment, antibiotics, and medicine for malaria, diabetes, and reproductive health. However, the amounts of supplies that can be airlifted remains limited. Many of these supplies also cannot be distributed to health facilities due to the continuing lack of fuel in Tigray. Also continuing is the suspension of truck convoys into Tigray, of course, including fuel tankers, and this limits the ability to distribute humanitarian aid more broadly. In recent weeks, since fewer than 7,000 people received food assistance in this was reduced rations. As part of the recent measles vaccination campaign in Tigray, more than 60,000 children under the age of 5 and some 11,000 pregnant and lactating women were screened for malnutrition. More than 20% of children and 55% of the women were found to be acutely malnourished. In the Amhara region, in the past week, more than 127,000 people received food assistance. However, some parts of northern Amhara are still inaccessible to aid workers due to insecurity. Today, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the government and the humanitarian community launched the country's humanitarian response plan for 2022. The plan is seeking $1.88 billion to provide humanitarian assistance to 8.8 million vulnerable people. The humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate in the country, particularly in the eastern province of the country, due to a volatile security situation. As we pointed out, as we've reported, attacks against civilians, including internally displaced people, and have increased over the past year, especially in Ituri and North Kivu provinces. Today, more than 27 million people in the DRC are facing severe and acute food insecurity, with nearly 5.5 million displaced people forced to move, sometimes several times. 500,000 men and women and children, refugees and asylum seekers from neighboring countries are hosted in the DRC. Humanitarian operations in the last year were the least funded in the last 4 years. The limited funding, that's 39% only of the amounts needed for the 2021 humanitarian response plan, was of course insufficient for the humanitarian organizations to cover the basic needs of 9.6 million men, women, and children identified as being the most vulnerable. Turning to the Sahel, the World Food Programme is telling us that the region is currently experiencing some of its driest conditions in many years. In the past 3 years, they say the number of people marching towards starvation has skyrocketed from 3.6 million to 10.5 million people in 5 countries, and that's Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger. The current crisis is expected to outpace previous years due to compounding factors, including insecurity, an increase in poverty due to COVID-19, and dramatic increases in the cost of staple food. WFP says funding shortages are a concern. The agency needs $470 million for the next 6 months to continue operations in the Sahel. Despite a challenging security context, it has worked with humanitarian partners to maintain life-saving support, reaching 9.3 million in the 5 countries since 2021. A couple more quick notes. From Cameroon, our resident and humanitarian coordinator, Mathias Nab, together with the UN teams and other humanitarian partners, condemned the recent attacks that destroyed schools in Cameroon. There have been 2 recent incidents that are the latest among a series of attacks on students, education staff, and premises, depriving more than 700,000 children of their rights to proper and safe education in the northwest and southwest parts of the country. The statement stressed that an attack on education is, of course, an attack on the future of all of Cameroon. And our friends at the UN Environment Programme in Nairobi tell us that wildfires are burning more severely and more often. Urban noise pollution is growing into a global public health menace. and phenological mismatches, that is, disruptions in the timing of life cycle stages in natural systems, are causing ecological consequences. These some of the findings in a new report by UNEP released today. The new publication identifies and offers solutions to these environmental issues, which highlights the urgent needs to assess the triple planetary crisis of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. That report is on the interweb. Update from COVID today. From Mongolia, where our resident coordinator, Tapan Mishra, is leading the team, which continues to support authorities to address the impacts of the pandemic. Through COVAX, we have helped deliver COVID-19 vaccines to 40% of Mongolians and have supported the construction of a new facility for central vaccine storage. To date, more than 92% of the target population has been fully vaccinated, with nearly 50% already having received a third booster dose, which is good news. The UN team has helped to coordinate the vaccination campaign, training frontline health workers, training frontline health workers, and providing medical equipment. We've also supported remote learning for schools and have delivered food and other items to more than 2,500 vulnerable households. Senior personnel appointment today related to COVID. The Secretary General is appointing Ted Shaiban of Lebanon. Sorry. That's the boss. That's the boss. He's just appointing Ted Shaiban of Lebanon as the global lead coordinator for COVID-19 vaccine country. He has appointed Ted Shaiban of Lebanon as global lead coordinator for COVID-19 vaccine country readiness and delivery at the level of Assistant Secretary General sitting in UNICEF. Mr. Shaiban will lead senior interagency teams to ensure an effective global response to the pandemic, supporting the COVID-19 vaccine country readiness and delivery. He will coordinate interagency efforts to forecast vaccine needs, as well as provide financial and technical assistance to overcome bottlenecks in a country-level implementation. Mr. Shaiban has worked in a number of positions for UNICEF since 1997. His bio is available to you. And lastly, we want to thank our friends who may be far away, but they've paid their budget dues in full, and that is our friends in New Zealand. They bring up the total of fully paid members to 57. Iftikhar, you were the first one in this room. You will get the first question.
Thanks, Steph. Regarding Secretary General's activities in Berlin, will he be, apart from the key subjects like Ukraine, taking up the question of release of full funds, frozen funds, because that country, Afghanistan, needs it badly for humanitarian purposes?
That is an issue, of course, we've been very, I think, vocal about. The Secretary General will have a number of bilaterals. We will give you readouts and confirm as they are. And if Afghanistan is discussed, depending on who his interlocutor is, we will let you know. Mr. Vaccaro.
Grazie mille. Thank you, Stéphane. At the Security Council, Secretary of State Blinken said again that invasion of Ukraine for Russia would be a war of choice. At the same time, Russia gave a report where they saying that there were crimes committed in Ukraine, in East Ukraine, crimes against war crimes. So what the Secretary General think about first if this would be a war of choice, and if he had any vision of this report before that the Russia just gave?
The Russian Federation has sent a letter to the Secretary General regarding this issue, and they've asked us to circulate it to the Security Council, which we are doing. We have no way of verifying this one way or another. I would refer you to what Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo mentioned about the work of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Eastern Ukraine. We continue to believe in the need for increased diplomacy. The Secretary General continues to hope and continues to think that this conflict will not happen. His message is one of increased diplomacy, of lowering tensions, of de-escalation, and that's the message he will continue to deliver.
So just a quick follow-up. So it will not, for the Secretary General, that will be a war choice?
Look, we're not, our focus is on preventing conflict, and I think for the Secretary General, it is clear that there not only remains, but there is a need for increased diplomacy to avoid any sort of conflict. Yes, sir.
Hi, I have several questions. First one, we know that State Secretary Blinken today is here, but the Secretary General is not. But is there any plans that Mr. Blinken will meet with some of those high-ranking officials in the United Nations?
I'm not aware that he's meeting with anyone else, any UN officials here, given that whether it's the Secretary General or the Deputy Secretary General, both away, and Rosemary DiCarlo is also in Munich. So I don't think he has any meetings with UN officials. Whether he's meeting other permanent representatives, you have to speak to the Americans.
And the second question is, we know that concerning the Ukraine situation, there's a escalation actually in the past 24 hours. But more broadly, if we saw those news, the Russian Federation just expelled a deputy U.S. ambassador, and also yesterday we saw the Pentagon release some press release that the two fight jets, they are very close to each other. Do you think the Ukraine situation now comes to another level with U.S. versus Russia?
Look, I mean, we have seen on one hand an escalation of rhetoric, of tensions. We would like to see the opposite, but we are also seeing a continuing and very active diplomacy at various levels, and that is for us the critical the critical factor.
Yeah, this comes with this third question, because we know that the Secretary General said public statements should aim to reduce tension, not inflame them. It seems for me the U.S. statements, they are somehow contradictory, because today Blinken said he will he will have the full support for the European countries to talk with Russian side. But on the other hand, also today, President Biden said he sensed that Russia will invade Ukraine in the next several days. So it seems contradictory.
Those are all valid points, but you're the journalist, you're the analyst. I will leave it to you to analyze, interpret, contextualize what is going on. I'm happy to answer your questions, but I can't do your job for you. Okay. Do we have anybody in the chat? Okay. Yes, Abdelhamid, please. Yes. Abdelhamid, and then I think Maggie was talking, but go ahead, Abdelhamid. And then Maggie.
Thank you. All the Russian officials have been denying going to war. It has been said by President Putin, his foreign minister, deputy foreign minister, permanent representative. The Russian official has denied they're going to war. Yet the U.S. and its allies keep insisting that the war is imminent. Even they said it would have started Tuesday and then said Wednesday. Now they're saying in several days. So what is the UN analysis? Where should we look at the truth? Is there war? Is the war imminent, or is there no war?
Look, again, I wish I could help you write your papers, but I can't. For the Secretary General, he continues to think that there will not be a conflict. A conflict would be catastrophic, right? He continues to push all of his interlocutors towards diplomacy. And we do see, on one hand, we see rhetoric, we see movements on the ground, but we also see, and we're holding on to that, we also see a commitment to continuing discussions, to continuing diplomacy. We've not heard anybody closing the door to talking, and that is important. And that is what we are holding on to. A nice background, Abdelhamid.
Question.
Yes, go ahead.
My second question. Israel has been bombarding areas in Syria. Last week, they killed one south of Damascus and injured a number of civilians also. There have been skirmishes even today. So what is the UN is doing about this increased violation of Syrian sovereignty?
Look, we continue to be concerned about the military actions that we see in various parts of Syria. If you ask what we are doing, we are continuing to push very hard on the political track, because that will be the only solution. Mr. Pedersen himself was in Damascus, I think as of yesterday, met with interlocutors. He will meet with the Syrian National Committee as well. Our action, again, in this area is focused on diplomacy, on finding a political solution. But for that, we need all of the parties involved on the ground, all those who have an influence, to move in the same direction, and that is a path towards a political solution. Margaret Bashir, Voice of America.
Hello, Steph, Voice of the UN.
Thank you.
Any updates on UN staff in Ukraine and any contingency plans?
No, we can.
Hearing war could happen.
The UN operations are continuing in Ukraine, including our humanitarian operations in the eastern part of the country, across the contact line. I think Rosemary DiCarlo made some reference to a couple of convoys that went in even this year. We've been highlighting the humanitarian situation, but there's been no change as of today, as far as I'm aware, in the posture of UN staff in the country.
And Steph, does that include their dependents? Is that a dependent post? Are families still there of staff, of international staff, obviously?
Yes, it's a family duty station. I'm not aware of any change in that posture as well.
And then can I ask you one more separately on the Yemen situation of the staff that you were talking about? You said the 5 others that were abducted on Friday. You used the word detained, whereas Mr. Griffiths and others have used the word abducted.
Yeah, I should have used. I mean, I think that the detain word was something it was probably not strong enough. These people were taken at gunpoint. Unclear exactly by whom, and they remained, as far as we understand, abducted at gunpoint.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.